There's a certain peace in being home alone. The silence, the privacy. It feels like the one place where you're truly safe. But sometimes that silence is the very thing that betrays you. Because when you're alone, you're also at your most vulnerable. Story 1, the scratching on the door. It was the winter of 2021. I had just moved into a small, third-floor apartment on the edge of a quiet suburb in Ohio. The building was old, with creaky floorboards and thin walls, but it was all I could afford as a college student. That night, a heavy snowstorm had hit the area, cutting off the streets and leaving the neighborhood in a blanket of eerie silence. My roommate had gone home for the holidays, so for the first time in months, I was completely alone. Around 10:30 p.m., I was sitting on my worn-out leather sofa, wrapped in a blanket, watching a documentary. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the heater. Suddenly, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the front door. At first, I froze. I thought maybe it was a branch hitting the building or the pipes reacting to the cold. I waited. 5 seconds passed. Then it happened again, but louder. It didn't sound like wood hitting wood. It sounded like metal, like someone was taking a long nail or a knife and slowly dragging it across the door's surface. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked to the door on my tiptoes, trying not to let the floorboards creak. I looked through the peephole. The hallway light was flickering, casting long, dancing shadows. There was no one there. The hallway was empty. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Just the wind, I whispered to myself. But as soon as I turned my back to go back to the sofa, a massive thud hit the door. It was so hard the entire frame shook. I jumped back, nearly falling over. And then the scratching started again. This time it was fast, frantic, and desperate. I realized then that whoever was doing this wasn't standing up. They were low. I looked through the peephole again, tilting my gaze downward. At the very bottom of the door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A hand, pale, thin, and covered in dirt, was reaching under the small gap between the door and the floor. The fingers were clawing at the carpet, trying to find a grip. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. The dispatcher's voice was calm, which only made me feel more panicked. "Someone is trying to get into my apartment," I hissed into the phone. As I was talking, the scratching suddenly stopped. A heavy silence filled the hallway. Then I heard a voice. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, gravelly whisper right against the wood of the door. "I can smell your dinner, Mark. I know you're right there." My name is Mark. I had never seen this person in my life. I hadn't even introduced myself to the neighbors yet. How did he know my name? The police arrived 10 minutes later, but in a snowstorm. 10 minutes feels like 10 hours. They found the hallway empty, but they found something on my door that the sergeant said he would never forget. Right at eye level, someone had carved my name into the wood with a jagged blade. And at the bottom of the door where the hand had been, they found a single, worn-out leather glove. The most disturbing part, the police checked the building's security footage. A man had entered the lobby behind a delivery driver, walked straight to my floor, and sat outside my door for 3 hours before he started scratching. He didn't try any other door. He was waiting for me. Story 2, the unlocked window. This happened during my junior year of high school. My parents had won a trip to Hawaii through my father's company, and since I had exams, I stayed behind. Our house was a large, 2-story colonial at the end of a dead-end street, bordered by a thick patch of woods. I have a very specific routine. Every night I check the locks. It's a habit I picked up from my dad. Front door, back door, garage, and every single window on the first floor. On this particular Wednesday, I finished my homework around midnight, did my sweep, and went upstairs. I remember clearly locking the window in the laundry room because the latch was always a bit sticky. I fell into a deep sleep, but around 3:15 a.m. I was jolted awake. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a sensation. You know that feeling when you're not alone? The air in the room felt different. It felt heavy. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard a sound from downstairs. Click, click, click. It was the sound of the stove's electric igniter. Someone was in the kitchen trying to turn on the gas. I felt a wave of pure terror wash over me. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but it wasn't there. I remembered I had left it charging in the kitchen. I was trapped upstairs with no way to call for help. I crawled out of bed, moving like a shadow. I reached the top of the stairs and peered down into the darkness. The kitchen light was off, but the moonlight through the window showed a figure standing by the island. It was a tall man, wearing a dark hoodie and a backpack. He wasn't looking for jewelry or electronics. He was just standing there, holding a large chef's knife that he had taken from our knife block. Then he did something that still haunts my dreams. He took a seat at the kitchen table, pulled my phone out of the charger, and started scrolling through it. He was looking at my photos, my messages, my life. Every few seconds, he would look up at the stairs, right where I was hiding, and grin. I knew I couldn't stay there. There was a landline phone in my parents' bedroom. I crept back, locked their door, and called the police. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher, whispering so quietly I could barely hear myself. "He's in the kitchen. He has a knife." The dispatcher told me to stay put, but then I heard the footsteps, slow, heavy thumps on the wooden stairs. Step, pause, step, pause. He was coming up. He reached the top of the stairs and started rattling the door handles of the guest rooms. When he reached the master bedroom, he stopped. He didn't rattle the handle. Instead, he leaned his head against the door. I could hear his heavy breathing through the wood. "I know you're in there," he whispered. "The laundry room window was so easy to open. You really should get that latch fixed." Just as he started to kick the door, the sound of sirens filled the street. I heard him run down the stairs and out the back. When the police arrived, they found the laundry room window wide open. The sticky latch had been forced from the outside with a crowbar. But the most chilling discovery was in the woods behind our house. The police found a small campsite. There was a binoculars pointed directly at my bedroom window and a notebook filled with my daily schedule. He had been watching me for 2 weeks, waiting for my parents to leave. Story 3, the attic light. I recently bought my first home, a fixer-upper in a rural part of Pennsylvania. It was a Victorian-style house with a wraparound porch and a very steep, dark attic. The previous owners had left a lot of junk up there, but I hadn't had the time to clear it out yet. Being a freelance graphic designer, I often work late into the night. One Tuesday, around 1:00 a.m., I went out to the driveway to grab my charger from my car. As I walked back toward the house, I instinctively looked up at the 3rd floor. A light was flickering in the attic window. My heart skipped a beat. There were no light fixtures in the attic, no bulbs, no wiring, nothing. I stood in the cold night air for a long time, watching that faint, yellow glow. It looked like candlelight. I went inside, locking the door behind me. I stood in the hallway, looking up at the ceiling hatch that led to the attic. I told myself it was just a reflection of the moon or maybe a neighbor's flashlight. But there were no neighbors for half a mile. I grabbed my heavy maglite and a baseball bat. I pulled the cord, and the wooden ladder creaked as it descended. Every step I took up those stairs felt like a step into a nightmare. The air grew colder and smelled of damp earth and old paper. I reached the top and shined my light around. Boxes, broken furniture, and old paintings stared back at me. I scanned the room. No one was there. I walked over to the window where I had seen the light. On the floor, there was an old brass candle holder. It was warm to the touch. Beside it was a half-burned candle and a small silver locket. I opened the locket. Inside was a picture of a young woman who looked remarkably like me, but the photo was old, sepia-toned. Suddenly, I heard a sound. It wasn't a footstep. It was a soft, rhythmic humming, a woman's voice singing a lullaby. It was coming from behind a tall, Victorian wardrobe in the far corner of the attic. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. stopped. Then the wardrobe door slowly creaked open. I expected a person, but instead a small, handwritten diary fell out. I picked it up. The last entry was dated yesterday. It said, "She moved in. She has my face. I will wait until she sleeps to take it back." I felt a sudden gust of wind and the attic hatch slammed shut, locking me inside. My flashlight began to flicker and then died completely. In the absolute darkness, I heard the humming start again, but this time it was right behind my ear. I screamed and threw my body against the hatch until it broke open. I fell through, hitting the floor below hard, and ran out of the house. I spent the night in a hotel and called a private investigator the next day. They found that the house had a priest hole, a secret compartment behind the attic walls. Inside, they found a sleeping bag, enough food for a month, and hundreds of photos of me taken from hidden holes drilled into the ceilings of every room in the house. The woman was never found, but sometimes, when the house is very quiet, I can still hear that faint, distant humming coming from the walls.